Right now on Morning News Now, pre-planned attack. The manhunt continues for the gunman. Police say targeted and killed UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson outside a New York City hotel. But we're learning about the threats that were made against Thompson before the shooting and the shell casings that were found at the scene. Not backing down. President-elect Trump's embattled pick for defense secretary says he is not stepping aside in his bid to join the Trump administration. Pete Hegseth set to meet again today with Republican lawmakers. The latest as Hegseth deals with the fallout of sexual assault and alcohol abuse allegations against him. No confidence. The French government toppled. Lawmakers passing a no confidence vote, a measure against the prime minister and his cabinet. How the embattled leader is reacting this morning and what's at stake for French President Macron just ahead. And getting prepared. We know you're busy this holiday season, but we've got a couple things you might want to add to your to-do list to get ready for tax season in the new year. How to prepare now so you can stay ahead and maximize that refund. Good to have you with us on this Thursday morning. I'm Joe Fryer. Savannah is on assignment. We're going to begin this morning with the latest on the manhunt for the gunman who shot and killed UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. The NYPD is calling it a premeditated, pre-planned, targeted attack. The brazen shooting was captured on a security camera playing out on the busy streets of Midtown Manhattan just as the workday was beginning on Wednesday. This morning, NBC News has learned that shell casings found at the scene had the words deny, defend, and depose written on them. That's according to a senior New York City law enforcement official briefed on the investigation. After the attack, police say the shooter took off through an alley, grabbed an e-bike, and rode into Central Park, which was filled with morning runners and walkers. A law enforcement source briefed on the investigation tells NBC News these photos of the suspect were taken before the shooting. WNBC reporter Chris Jose has the latest.
Images of a gunman plastered all over Midtown, a manhunt underway, the NYPD asking for the public's help to find a killer. The chilling scene playing out on surveillance video, a gunman shooting and killing UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson outside the Hilton Hotel on 54th Street and 6th Avenue. The shooter using what appears to be a suppressor on the gun, firing 3 shots. Thompson's family speaking out as police search for the suspect.
Brian was a wonderful person with a big heart and who lived life to the fullest. He will be greatly missed by everybody. Our hearts are broken and we are completely devastated by this news.
Thompson, who's from the Twin Cities, was scheduled to speak at his company's annual investor conference at the Hilton. The conference now canceled. Police released this photo of the shooter wearing a mask inside a Midtown Starbucks before the attack. Police say the shooting was targeted.
The shooter steps onto the sidewalk from behind the car. He ignores numerous other pedestrians, approaches the victim from behind and shoots him in the back.
The shooting happening in front of a woman who runs away unharmed. A witness watching it unfold from his parked car.
I was shocked, because this first time I see crime in front of me. I was shocked. And now I'm afraid that she could shoot me too.
The shooter took off through an alley, according to the NYPD, grabbed an e-bike, and was last seen in Central Park. In a phone call with NBC News, Thompson's wife expressing concern. There has been threats, basically, I don't know, a lack of coverage, adding, I don't know details. I just know that he said there were some people that had been threatening him.
I want to be clear. At this time, every indication is that this was a premeditated, pre-planned, targeted attack.
Cops now sifting through Thompson's social media and speaking to his family to find out if Thompson had any known enemies.
The idea of a CEO being targeted, he just kind of makes you wonder, It is an insurance company, but I don't know if that has anything to do with it.
Our thanks to Chris Jose for that report. For more, we're joined now by NBC News terrorism analyst, retired ATF special agent in charge, Jim Kavanaugh. Jim, good morning. Good to have you with us. So let's start off with that new reporting. The bullets used to kill Brian Thompson had the words deny, defend, and depose written on them. Now, the NYPD, they said it's a targeted shooting. The motive, though, still is unclear. From what you know, does this look like a professional assassination? And just what do you make of those words that were written on those bullets?
Well, I think it's very important to the investigation, the words written on the bullets, number one. Let's talk about that. And everybody's jumped to the conclusion yesterday that it's absolutely a targeted shooting at this one executive, everything else thrown away. And I said yesterday on air, look, that's the major lead category, certainly. It really looks like Mr. Thompson was the target, and your detectives have to be set there. But you can't totally accept that, because from the facts we know, we're just not sure of that. In other words, random killers, the first one they do also looks targeted. So maybe 5% of your investigative effort here needs to be make sure you have an open mind here. And when you get this defend, deny, depose on the bullets, certainly it could be a red herring, clearly could be, but it also could be telling us what's in this guy's mind. So I would just say, if I was the commander on this, I would be looking certainly in the major lead category that it was Mr. Thompson who was the target for a reason specifically to him alone. But I'd also be looking at, is this someone who's looking to kill, you know, businessmen, or someone who looks like a businessman on the street? And was that location picked because it had his escape route? In other words, it was picked because it was in front of a major hotel where he knew a convention was, where he knew businessmen come, and he has an escape route down the alley, the city bike, into the park, and he disappears. And, you know, the timing of it, to me, I'm just not clear on how exactly he timed this particular guy's arrival within 5 minutes at 6:46 a.m. I still haven't been able to reconcile that in my mind. Or was he a person who was going on the sidewalk, waiting for someone in a suit, a businessman, or maybe even this particular businessman? That's possible. And, you know, going to kill him. So all the answers aren't in. So when you start repeating to yourself as the commanders, oh, yeah, it's targeted only at Mr. Thompson, you could lose the lead that maybe this is a broader thing. And that defend, depose, deny could be a red herring. Like I say, somebody could put that on there, Joe, just to throw you off. Or it could be a peek into the killer's mind. In other words, I'm this anarchist, you know, agent of chaos. I want to take out, you know, the establishment.
So, Jim,
here's
because
an example of it. So who knows, you know?
Because of that route that he took that you mentioned there with the bike, I mean, just at this point, 24 hours later, how hard is it going to be to find him now? What do investigators need to do to try to locate this gunman?
Well, the telephone in the alley is one lead. They got to decide if that really is him. Again, it could be also not related at all because it's a big city. People drop cell phones. It could have been him dropping it as a red herring. It could really be his cell phone. There's a lot of questions there. The cameras, Joe, that everybody's talked about, they're piecing that together. Can they find one where his mask is off? Certainly the shell casings, you know, there can be fingerprints on shell casings. There could be DNA. You know, him racking the gun, him having the silencer. Look, it's premeditated. He was going to murder. He went for some planning and effort to do this. But, you know, is he a professional killer? Not from the way he acted, I don't think. Not from his manner in shooting. His gun is not functioning right. It's not feeding right. He's manipulating it. He ejected 3 live rounds on the street. He clearly wanted to leave the messages, defend, deny, depose, and so he wants you to know that. Mm-hmm. I'd be alert. Could there be another message coming on a Reddit site or some site somewhere on the internet? So There's a lot cooking in this case. Commanders just got to keep an open mind.
All right, Jim Kavanaugh. Jim, appreciate your time this morning. Thank you. Turning now to the latest in the battle over President-elect Trump's controversial cabinet picks. His defense secretary choice, Pete Hegseth, vowing to fight for the job. That's despite Republican sources telling NBC News that as many as 6 GOP senators are not comfortable supporting his nomination. Hegseth's bid to lead the Department of Defense is facing significant challenges amid mounting allegations of excessive drinking as well as a sexual assault. Now, Hegseth was not charged, but paid his accuser a sum as part of a settlement in 2023. Has also said he would not drink if he was nominated and confirmed in the role. The Trump campaign is denying multiple reports suggesting the president-elect is now eyeing a replacement for Hegseth, a list that includes Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. On Wednesday, Hegseth told conservative commentator Megyn Kelly that Mr. Trump has encouraged him to keep fighting. He also denied allegations he has a problem with alcohol.
Ultimately, he reiterated the same thing this morning. Hey, Pete, I got your back. It's a fight. They're coming after you. Get after it. First of all, I've never had a drinking problem. No one's ever approached me and said, oh, you should really look at getting help for a drink. Never.
NBC News White House correspondent Ali Rafa joins us now with the latest. Ali, good morning. So Hegseth wrote an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal yesterday accusing the media of trying to take him down. Keep in mind, a few weeks ago, he was part of the media. What else is he doing to try and counter these allegations about his personal life and try and save his nomination?
Yeah, Joe, good morning. Well, Pete Hegseth is remaining defiant in this fight to become the next defense secretary, and he's trying to get in front of as many faces as possible to make his case. As you mentioned, he wrote that combative op-ed in the Wall Street Journal yesterday. He also sat down for an interview with another former Fox News host, Megyn Kelly, yesterday, in which he said that President-elect Trump still has his back. He blamed the press for what he called a smear campaign. And then, as you mentioned, he vowed that if confirmed as defense secretary, he would quit drinking altogether. And we know that's something especially personal to the president-elect, who himself does not drink alcohol. And he says that is because of his brother's death from alcoholism. We also saw his own mother on Fox News yesterday after, over the weekend, the New York Times reported that she wrote a scathing email to him amid his divorce from his second wife, in which she called him an abuser of women. The New York Times saying that she immediately wrote a subsequent email to him in which she apologized. And on Fox News yesterday, she said that Hegseth is, quote, a new person, saying he's redeemed, forgiven, changed, and saying, I think he is the man for the job. So this is really an all hands on deck effort to really assuage these doubters of Hegseth. The big question now is whether this is making any impact at all.
Yeah, I mean, so just real quickly, in terms of the vote count in the Senate, do we have an idea what the odds are that he'll get confirmed?
So Republican sources are telling NBC that there are more than 3 Republican senators that are already a no on Hegseth. And remember, that is the number he can afford to lose to still get confirmed. If any more Republican senators vote no with all Democratic senators, that will essentially tank his nomination. And so this is why you're seeing this all hands on deck effort, and Hegseth going to Capitol Hill, meeting with all of these senators, even going yesterday to the House side to meet with Republican representatives and asking them to publicly defend him. And our Hill team, as you mentioned in the intro there, is hearing that possibly that number could actually be as high as 6. So obviously that could change considering this ongoing campaign by Hegseth. But that is where the number stands right now, Joe.
Yeah, he won't get confirmed if 6 say no. So meanwhile, you got at least 2 sources who've told NBC News the president-elect is looking for a replacement nominee to lead the DOD. What do we know about who he might be considering for the job?
Yeah, sources familiar with these discussions say that these possible contenders include, because of that leadership experience compared to Hegseth, and sources familiar with these discussions also say that some other possible contenders include Iowa Senator Joni Ernst, as well as Tennessee Senator Bill Hagerty. Joe.
All right, Ali Rafa, thank you so much. The House task force investigating the assassination attempts of President-elect Donald Trump will hold its final hearing on Capitol Hill today. The bipartisan panel is expected to question acting U.S. Secret Service Director Ronald Rowe. They're looking into 2 different attempts on Mr. Trump's life, one at a Pennsylvania campaign rally in July, another on a Florida golf course in September. The panel aims to wrap up its inquiry and release a report in the coming weeks. That report will detail the security failures by the Secret Service that rattled the country during the height of the presidential campaign. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale joins us now with more on this. Ali, good morning. So just what can we expect from this final hearing and acting Director Rowe's testimony today?
Well, we've only seen this committee, rather task force, publicly do one hearing. And so this will be the last one. It will also only be the second time that we've seen this group of bipartisan lawmakers gather in a public forum and sort of tell the public what new things they've learned. I imagine that one of the things that we're going to hear about is their visits to the Butler site, which they talked about in their first hearing, but then also their visits to the West Palm Beach site of that second attempted assassination attempt. And that will be a clear focus. But I think that when you look at what it could look like going forward, the fact that the acting Secret Service director is the sole witness does point us to the fact that they are going to be looking at what structurally went wrong, which everyone agrees on in bipartisan fashion, that clearly something went wrong if this was able to happen, specifically in Butler. But then also what can make sure it never happens again. And I think that's where the final report and also this final hearing are going to be really important.
How's the task force's findings going to impact the Secret Service? Could changes come out of this?
Well, and we'll wait to see what Roe says, because I think that one of the criticisms that we've seen of the Secret Service in the multiple appearances that both the former director and now the acting director have made on Capitol Hill is that they have not been particularly forthcoming with answers to key questions. Basically, how could this have happened? And I think lawmakers are eager, as the public is, to get some specifics on what went wrong and how to ensure it doesn't happen again. So we'll be looking for that in Roe's testimony. Certainly, the taking accountability piece is clear, and we've seen that from the Secret Service, but lawmakers are going to want this acting director to go a step further. They've also been able to subpoena and get records from various other agencies that are in relation to the Secret Service, and so we'll be eager to see what those findings actually are based on the committee's work behind the scenes, and also if they've been able to glean anything from actually going to these sites. Ultimately, they're going to push forward on a final report. We're going to see that by the end of the year, not just because they're good workers and want to be productive before 2025, but also because the task force itself has to, based on the way that it was created initially congressionally, has to issue a final report by the end of the year.
All right. Ali Vitale. Ali, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
2 kindergarten students are in critical condition after a school shooting yesterday in California. It happened north of Sacramento at the Feather River Adventist School in Palermo. The sheriff says the shooting began after the gunman met with the principal to talk about enrolling a student. The boys, who were injured, 5 and 6 years old, they were both rushed to the hospital. As for the shooter, officials say he was found dead. It appears he shot himself. The sheriff explained why this particular school may have been targeted.
We have received some information that leads us to believe that the subject responsible for this shooting targeted this school because of its affiliation with the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And what we're currently seeing leads me at this point to believe that this is an isolated incident.
The gunman has not yet been identified publicly by police. Officials also say they don't believe he had any connection to the school. Time now for weather. Millions are under winter alerts this morning in the Midwest and parts of the Northeast. Meteorologist Angie Lassman is tracking the snow and more for us this morning. Angie, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. Winter in full force out there, and we've got a couple of impacts that folks across this same region of the Northeast and the Great Lakes could see here in the next couple of days. Let's start with those winter alerts. They're quite expansive, 17 million people included in them. They stretch from New England up through parts of the Great Lakes, and they do have some blizzard warnings included in there, specifically for places like Erie, Pennsylvania, which, as you might remember, just a couple of days ago received a really good dose of some snow. More on the way here in the coming days, not just for Erie, for a couple of spots. We've got plenty of rain kind of working out across parts of the coastal areas of the Northeast. We've got some snow for places like Hartford, stretching into parts of New York and back towards the lakes. This is kind of the routine that we're going to be in here for the day today, and then we'll see most of that move out by the time we get into tomorrow. This is all part of a Clipper system. It means it's a fast-moving system. That's part of it being a Clipper system, and that's going to be out of the picture before you know it here as we get to the end of the day today. But in the meantime, those strong winds and those really intense kind of snow bands are going to set up and impact us with travel on the roads and potentially travel in the air. Notice back behind the system, even when it's long gone, we're still going to see those winds coming across the lakes and producing a good amount of snow downwind of the lake. So just east of those lakes, specifically in places that, again, have already received a good amount of snow in just the last week or so. When it's all all said and done with this additional snowfall through Saturday, notice some of those higher amounts, about a foot in places across New York and Pennsylvania, but we could see localized amounts double that, so up to 2 feet by the time we get through the weekend. So heads up for travel on the roads there. Also, we've got really strong winds behind it. If you go outside in places like New York, Philadelphia, State College, Hartford today, you're going to notice just how gusty it is. We've got 51 million people under these wind alerts right now. Now, when we look at the peak winds as we get through the day, 40, 50 mile per hour winds are what's on the high end. That includes places like New York and Baltimore, but 30s plus across parts of the Great Lakes and the Midwest. Now, this is going to be problematic for the potential for maybe some down trees, some down power lines, but also when it comes to travel, this will likely affect airplanes taking off today, specifically in places like New York. So we've got Newark, we've got LaGuardia, of course, Philadelphia Airport also, and then potential delays to look out for Boston, Washington, D.C., Detroit, and Chicago. So just a heads up for anyone traveling today. And otherwise, it's the cold that will get your attention across the plains. We have got temperatures into, the single digits across parts of the northern plains. But even Cincinnati, it is 20 degrees there right now, but feeling like a whopping 5 degrees, -6 below in Chicago. The extra layers are definitely needed, Joe. And you'll notice all of that cool air starts to filter a little farther to the east by the time we get to the end of the work week. Notice 35 degrees in Detroit for Friday. Norfolk ends up into the low 40s. These temperatures below normal for this time of year, but definitely feeling like winter as far south as Atlanta, Charleston, who will just top out into the 40s. Even Memphis not getting out of the 30s for tomorrow. And then we've got 50s on tap along the Gulf Coast. So, people that were asking for the winter feel, your wishes are commanded.
You get what you asked for. I have to say, I was at the tree lighting last night, and the snow started coming down in the middle of the performance. It's not obviously enough to accumulate, but it was pretty. It was blowing around. It was magical.
Listen, it's part of the experience as long as it's you were bundled up.
Oh, yeah, I had like many
prepared.
I was a Minnesotan. I had many layers on. Thank you,
I never
Angie.
doubted you.
Appreciate it. Much more to come here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, it may not be tax season yet, but what you do now can pay off when it's time to file your return. So we're going to talk live with a tax expert who's going to share tips on how to get ahead. Up first, the future of the French government now in limbo after a no-confidence vote against the prime minister. Details next. We're back with cell phone video that appears to show a U.S. Border Patrol vehicle striking a migrant and sending him airborne. As that video circulates, President-elect Trump's pick for border czar is doubling down on the incoming administration's deportation plans. NBC News correspondent Guad Venegas has all the details, and we do want to warn you this video might be difficult to watch.
The shocking video that has advocates asking for answers at the U.S. southern border. This video showing what appears to be a Border Patrol SUV striking a person at the border wall between Tijuana and San Isidro, California. It's unclear what happened before the video begins, but the man manages to get back on his feet before the patrol returns and apprehends the remaining individuals attempting to scale the border fence.
This is extremely egregious when you have a Border Patrol agent that is what looks like using his vehicle to cause harm to someone.
What did your organization do?
Our organization filed an inquiry requesting an investigation to this incident.
When asked about the video, U.S. Customs and Border Protection telling NBC News the incident is being reviewed. The video coming to light just weeks ahead of a new administration promising to secure the border and taking a hard line on immigration.
On day one, I will launch the largest deportation program in American history to get the criminals out.
For weeks, Democratic leaders and city officials have vowed to push back, threatening to retaliate with lawsuits, passing state legislation, and refusing to lend state authorities to enforce deportation efforts. While others, including New York City's Mayor Eric Adams, offering to work with the incoming administration. For months, he has said he opposes mass deportation, but has called for violent migrants to be deported.
Well, cancel me, because I'm going to protect the people of this city. And if you come into this country, in this city, and think you're going to harm innocent New Yorkers and innocent migrants and asylum seekers, this is not the mayor you want to be in the city under.
Adams adding he wants to sit down with the incoming Trump border czar.
I've just been notified he wants to sit down and meet with me. I'm willing to meet with him.
Last month, Homan issuing this warning to any leaders defying his deportation plans.
And I'm sending a message for people that say they're going to get in our way. They're going to stop us from doing what we're doing on interior enforcement operation. I've said 100 times in the last week, don't cross that line.
Immigration lawyers and activists painting a picture of who some of the first targets of that deportation effort could be. The nearly 180,000 migrants wearing ankle monitors as their immigration status is sorted out. Experts say those losing their case and receiving a deportation order would be some of the easiest to locate, including this woman, Romina, who spoke with Noticias Telemundo. Saying, I am afraid because I can't be in Colombia, making reference to the danger she, like many others, say they now fear if they are returned to their home country. Guad Venegas, NBC News.
France could be heading toward political gridlock. The country's government was ousted by lawmakers in a historic no-confidence vote yesterday. This morning, Prime Minister Michel Barnier submitted his resignation to French President Emmanuel Macron after serving just 3 months on the job. NBC News international correspondent Claudia Lavonga joins us now with the latest on all this. So first of all, Claudia, help us understand why this no-confidence vote was called in the first place and just how the Prime Minister and his government lost the vote.
Hey, Joe, good morning. Well, the fact that Barnier was ousted literally 3 months after he was appointed by President Macron back in September, makes his government the shortest-lived government in the history of France, and that tells you everything. But it wasn't that surprising, to be honest, that he was ousted so soon, because as soon as he came into power and as soon as he was appointed, he not only had to deal with a very divided, fragmented parliament. There was no real majority there. He also had to deal with a widespread public discontent about several issues, immigration, rising inflation. But in the end, what did it for Barnier was the budget. He proposed billions of dollars in spending cuts and billions of dollars in tax increases. And that managed to do something incredible in France, which is unite the two opposition coalitions from the left and from the right. Usually they are very divided, and that's when they went for Barnier, and that's what led to this vote of confidence and to the ousting of the French Prime Minister, Joe.
So now that the Prime Minister has resigned, what happens next? Do we know who President Macron could choose next?
Well, what happens next is that the Prime Minister will tender his resignation to President Macron, who then will have to choose a successor, but he cannot call for new elections until next year. Well, that means that this will be the beginning of a long period of political instability in France, not only for the government, but also for President Macron, because if Macron, whoever Macron chooses as a successor, can be just as well ousted by the two coalitions. And if Macron doesn't manage to find a candidate that then finds the support of the majority, then there will be also calls for him to resign as well. Joe?
And is that something that could actually happen? Could we see a call for new elections, and how would that procedure work?
It is something that can happen, and it is something that some coalitions and parties have been calling for a while now. Marine Le Pen is one, of course. Now, we all remember that President Macron was in trouble long before the Olympics, for instance, where he took a big gamble after losing, essentially, the European elections before the Olympics. He took this political gamble in calling for snap elections, for early elections. Well, he came out somewhat victorious by then installing the Prime Minister Barnier, but that only managed to delay the process by only 3 months. We'll have to see what happens in the coming weeks.
All right, Claudio, thank you so much. Coming up, a landmark case is heard before the Supreme Court that could have a huge impact on transgender rights. When we return, we're going to break down the arguments heard in the High Court and how the justices might be leaning. Stay with us. We're back now with a look at a landmark case argued before the Supreme Court over transgender rights and one state's ban on transition treatments for minors. The court heard oral arguments yesterday. At issue, a Tennessee law that bans puberty blockers and hormone therapy for trans youth. After more than 2 hours of oral arguments, the conservative majority appeared to be skeptical of the challenges to the Tennessee law, which could have an impact far beyond Tennessee's borders. NBC News Supreme Court reporter Lawrence Hurley joins us now with more on what happened yesterday. Lawrence, good morning. So just what were the major takeaways from yesterday's oral arguments? And this conservative bloc of justices, what was it they were saying or asking about that's leading so many observers to believe that they are leaning toward upholding the ban?
Yeah, good morning. Good to talk to you again. The one thing to remind viewers straight off the top is that, there's a 6-3 conservative majority on the Supreme Court. So, any case making these kind of arguments is sort of an uphill battle before you've even started. And that's basically how it proved during the oral arguments. You got the conservative wing of the court seem very skeptical of the idea that these laws that ban gender-affirming care for transgender teens are even a form of sex discrimination at all, any even classification based on sex, because they see it as more of a medical procedure that the legislature has a right to restrict when they look into things like this. We saw Chief Justice John Roberts, for example, saying that the Supreme Court justices are not doctors. They're not experts on this. How can we possibly kind of weigh in on this? Leave it to the democratic process. But that's something that the liberal justices, who obviously in the minority, but they push back strongly on that, with Justice Sonia Sotomayor, for example, saying that, the transgender people are a vulnerable minority group, and you can't really rely on the democratic process to protect them in the same way that in the past you couldn't rely on the democratic process to protect racial minorities, for example. So that was kind of the tenor of the argument. Obviously, we don't know exactly what they're going to do, but it's kind of seemed like this Tennessee law will be upheld.
So, Lawrence, no matter the outcome of the court's decision, this case is going to have a broad impact. We know that. Right now, there are more than 20 states that have laws similar to Tennessee. So talk more about how a ruling upholding this law could affect gender-affirming care all across the country.
Yeah, exactly. This case only concerns this law in Tennessee, but obviously the logic, if they say these equal protection challenges against these laws can't move forward, then that would apply to these other laws as well. And so, some of these laws might be different to the Tennessee one, but basically it means that states have a green light to pass laws like this. And then the big question then is what happens to gender-affirming care for adults, because that's not an issue in this case, but the same kind of logic would apply. So if states wanted to try and ban that would lead to another round of litigation. And then there's other litigation out there as well about things like sports and transgender girls being on girls' sports teams. That's another live issue that's coming up that could be affected by this. So there's lots of stuff going on that will be affected by this ruling.
And Lawrence, we know the Biden administration opposes this law, but the incoming Trump administration seems to support it. In fact, we know the president-elect would like to see something like this Tennessee law federally. What about this case could impact that? And just remind us when we would expect to see a ruling on this from the court.
Yeah, so that's a little wrinkle in this case, is obviously the fact that the Trump administration is taking office while the court's going to be considering this case. And the case was brought by the Biden administration. So it's possible that the Trump administration could notify the court while they're considering the case to say, the federal government, actually, we've changed our position and we don't actually think that this is a constitutional issue at all. That doesn't mean the court won't go ahead and decide the case, because there are separate plaintiffs, which means there's still kind of a live issue there. But, the change of position could give the conservative justices a bit more of an excuse to kind of rule against the plaintiffs. And we would expect a ruling sometime in the spring, probably.
All right. Spring is when those rulings tend to come down. Lawrence Hurley, as always, thank you so much. An Illinois sheriff's deputy is being hailed as a hero for putting himself in harm's way. The moment was captured on video. It shows an out-of-control car speeding into a freezing lake after the brakes failed. Inside, a pregnant woman. NBC News correspondent Yasmin Vasugian has the details.
A pregnant woman losing control of her car with no way to stop.
I need help. My brakes won't stop. My car won't stop. My brakes aren't working.
Jalen Mokaby was driving home around 2 a.m. on December 1st when her steering wheel locked up and her brakes gave out.
She was scared to death. She had a whirlwind of emotions going on at the time and not really knowing what to do.
Jalen's mother says she called 911 when she realized she needed help.
I'm 20 weeks pregnant. I cannot die today.
Sheriff's deputies responded immediately, tracking down her vehicle as it headed straight towards a freezing Illinois lake, just a quarter of a mile away.
She still continued towards that dead end.
Deputy Tyler Coffey sped towards Jalen's Chevy Malibu, which was now in neutral, moving straight down the roadway at 30 miles an hour. As he drove past her, he positioned his car directly in front of her vehicle and waited.
I'm going to hit him!
stopping Jalen's car just in time and potentially saving her life and the life of her unborn child with her dog in the back of the car.
For them to be there at that time, that was just a complete miracle.
In a statement, Sheriff Diedrich said, quote, had the deputy not been on scene or delayed performing this maneuver, the driver and vehicle would have likely gone into the water upon reaching the lake. Jalen now recovering, but still shaken by the incident, and the deputy a holiday hero.
Yasmin Vasugian, NBC News.
Coming up, we are still over a month away from the start of tax season, but it doesn't mean you can't start preparing now. We're going to chat with our tax expert, Mark Stieber, who's going to let you know how you can get ahead and get the biggest refund possible. Stay with us. You're watching Morning News Now. We're back with details from a heated hearing on Capitol Hill yesterday. Several major airline executives were in the hot seat after that record-breaking Thanksgiving travel period. Lawmakers grilled them on how airlines charge passengers for additional fees. NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Chung takes us inside the hearing room.
As Americans scrambled home for the holiday last week, some frustrated travelers giving no thanks to the airlines.
Why am I paying to sit in the aisle or window in row 24?
A record 3 million passengers traveled through TSA checkpoints this Sunday of Thanksgiving weekend. Some turning to creative ways to avoid those bag fees. On Capitol Hill, senators took the airlines to task, fuming over things like seat fees, which generated more than $12 billion in revenue over a 6-year period.
Nobody enjoys flying in your airlines. It's a disaster.
Executives from 5 airlines testified to a Senate subcommittee following a report accusing low-cost carriers Frontier and Spirit of paying gate agents $26 million in incentives between 2022 and 2023 for stopping customers violating their bag policies, $5 to $10 for each catch.
That seems like a bounty.
Spirit Airlines said it ended that policy in September, but Frontier?
Will you commit to ending it?
I wouldn't characterize it as a bounty program. It's not something I'm able to commit to.
The committee also taking aim at the major airlines, asking why they can't share profitability metrics on their bag policies.
We routinely do not look at it that way.
You don't look at the number?
We look at our profitability very carefully by flight and by market and by region, but we do not look at our profitability by baggage.
It defies imagination.
A turbulent ride for the airlines ahead of what could be another record-breaking holiday later this month. Brian Chung, NBC News.
All right, from fees to taxes, we are less than 1 month from the start of tax season. Experts say now is the time to start planning ahead. More than 161 million Americans are expected to file a tax return in 2025. We're here to help you prepare so you can maximize that refund. Friend of the show and Chief Tax Information Officer at Jackson Hewitt, Mark Stieber, is here with us in studio with more. Always good to have you with us because I feel like for you, tax season is year-round, and you do a good job of reminding us of that. Before the end of the year, what should we be doing to either maximize the refund or make sure we're paying the government less? What are the things you recommend folks do on top of all that holiday shopping?
Well, there's 2 buckets. First, try to put more money in your pocket, and we'll talk about a couple of simple tax planning tips that you can do on that. But more importantly, as you say, if you've been watching the show for any length of time, it is a year-round event, and those that want a bigger refund, those that want a better experience, have to plan. As I mentioned to you, it's kind of like getting ready for the beach on Friday night. You can't get in shape that day. You can't get a bigger refund with about 600 hours left in the year, but you can do some things. If you're an itemizer, consider additional charitable donations or bunching your medical or even paying an extra home mortgage payment. If you're not an itemizer, consider one last paycheck, upping your 401k contribution, or putting some money aside for an IRA. But more importantly, planning is the key to maximizing your refund. Getting organized, finding last year's materials, your last year tax return, finding a tax pro in advance, not just walking in. And if you're going to do it yourself, pay no attention to those social media tax tips or your Uncle Bob with TikTok. That's a recipe for disaster. So an organized plan, critical to getting a good experience and a bigger refund.
You want to have a good tax beach body this year. All right, so anything different about filing this year, this upcoming year, compared with what we did this last year?
Yeah, you may hear it's a benign year, and that's typical when you have a presidential election. Nobody wants to help the other side, but there were some big changes, and the one big one that got settled about a week ago is there's going to be a new 1099-K form. If you're a side hustler or you get money paid through those third-party platforms like Venmo or PayPal, this year if you have more than $5,000 in the whole year, you're going to get a 1099 on that, and so is the IRS, which means you can't just ignore it as a hobby, even though it's probably supposed to be on there. So watch for the new 1099K, and it's part of a 3-year plan. Next year goes to $2,500 and then $600. So if you've got side gig income, you need to pay attention to that. But that also can boost you if you keep track of your records and so forth.
I'm guessing you're seeing more and more people who are doing that these days.
A lot more people started in the pandemic, but now a lot more people are going to have to find their religion and put it on their tax return.
All right. So the average tax refund this year was just under $3,000. Do you think it's going to be similar, maybe a little more this year? What are you looking at?
Well, there's been a lot of inflationary adjustments, larger standard deduction, larger credits. And so I always caution people on comparing yourself with the person in the cube next to you, because really your situation is unique. And even though the average refund for 100 million people was about $3,000, there was feast and famine all along that line. Some people got a much bigger refund if they had a child or had dependents. Some people got a lower refund when their children moved out. Some people got a bigger refund when they paid attention to their side gig and they were making estimates. Some who didn't make estimates during the year and they had to put that side gig income on there, they got a much lower refund because they had to pay that tax on the side gig. So it really is big and small, and if you paid attention, like watching this program, you're probably going to get a bigger refund. If you're watching the other network, you're probably going to owe.
There you go. That's a commercial right there. Watch us for more money. Mark Stever, always good to have you with us. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. More money news. Bitcoin is hitting new highs. CNBC's Savannah Henao has that and some other financial headlines. Hey, Savannah, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning to you. Yeah, so Bitcoin breaks through, topping $100,000 for the first time and rising as high as $104,000 late last night before pulling back. And this as the massive rally in the cryptocurrency since the election rolls on. And the milestone coming just hours after President-elect Trump signaled a lighter approach to regulation for the crypto industry when he said he plans to nominate crypto advocate Paul Atkins to be the next SEC chairman. Now, Bitcoin has climbed from $69,000 on election day. JetBlue is cutting more routes as it tries to return to more consistent profits and cut costs. It will cut flights from Fort Lauderdale to Jacksonville, as well as from New York's JFK Airport to Austin, Houston, Miami, and Milwaukee, and end service to San Jose, California. Customers who are affected by the changes can choose an alternate flight or receive a refund if other routes aren't available. And get this, Taylor Swift has conquered the Billboard and concert charts and the box office, and now she's also queen of the book world. Swift's Eras tour book selling more than 800,000 copies over the Thanksgiving weekend, even though it was only available exclusively through Target. Now, the only bigger nonfiction book launch was A Promised Land. That was the first volume of Barack Obama's presidential memoirs, but that was available through all major outlets, Joe.
What's left for her? Like Broadway? Is that the next thing?
Probably. Yeah, probably.
Okay, all right. Sounds good.
If even that.
All right, Savannah, thank you so much. It is a classic all-American vehicle that has been a garage staple for almost 5 decades. We're talking about the minivan. This budget-friendly ride was once produced by a dozen car makers. Now it's only made by a third of those companies, despite the lower price tag. And that's leading many to ask, is the minivan dead? NBC News correspondent Sam Brock takes a closer look.
A revolutionary automotive idea.
Ever since the minivan became part of the American lexicon in the 1980s.
Powerful new reason why the pride is back.
It's undergone all kinds of reboots, from family-friendly
Can you take Timmy to tuba practice?
to flush with features.
It is a leather-trimmed interior.
To even, dare we say, quasi-cool. But after peaking at 1.3 million sales in 2000, minivans barely eked out around 2% of all light vehicles sold in 2023. And the dozen or so car makers once producing them have now shrunk to just 4.
It says town and country. If you don't own one, you wouldn't understand.
Which does not faze a minivan fanatic like Matilda Patterson Fisher in the slightest.
This is not your mom's minivan.
Her 2011 Blackberry pearl-colored town and country, named Baby, is her treasure.
Do you feel like it's also a part of Americana?
I think it is. I think it's a seriously overlooked part.
Matilda and her husband Jeff took us for a spin.
When you see another town and country driver, do you guys sort of know real recognizes real and everyone?
Oh yeah, I'll give them a nod. I'll give them a wave.
She says the comfort, convenience, and space is unparalleled.
These numbers are going down, but that's not the vibe you're getting on Facebook.
Not on Facebook and the car shows, because we are showing up to the car shows.
Yeah.
It never used to be like that.
On Facebook, Minivan Life has more than 8,000 members. Chrysler Town and Country owners, 11,000. And van culture community, almost 50,000. Even millennial dads, like 37-year-old Jesse Perry, are digging what minivans are bringing to the table. He says it's a much more reasonable price tag than many SUVs.
Minivans are low to the ground, which helps with cargo, which helps with kids. Some people talk about minivans as if it's embarrassing, but personally, I'd be embarrassed to overspend on something where you're not getting anything extra.
Professor Robert Thompson at Syracuse's Newhouse School of Public Communications, he says with the advent of SUVs and crossovers, their appeal for many has changed.
I see the SUV and the crossover for many, many people more of an evolution of the minivan than the minivan is dead.
And that's just fine for Matilda and other like-minded minivan mavens who know their perfect ride when they see it. Sam Brock, NBC News, Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Clearly, Sam needs a major van to fit into the back there. All right, coming up, Hurricane Milton left widespread devastation after ravaging the Southeast back in October. When we come back, we're going to share an update on a dog getting a new lease or perhaps a new leash on life after being found tied to a fence during the storm. Get that story next. Stay with us. There you have it, that dazzling Norway spruce finally lit right here in Rockefeller Center. The night was a little chilly. At one point, snowflakes started to fall on the wide-eyed spectators. Performances from host Kelly Clarkson, we saw the Rockettes, the Backstreet Boys, and so many more helped keep us warm. So if you're planning a visit, we got a little information right there on the screen for you. The best times to catch it if you're looking for your own personal lighting. You've got until about mid-January to see it live and in action. Of course, for all the pomp and circumstances exciting, Rock Center Tree also carries a gentle reminder for all of us this holiday season. Life can be hard, but no matter what we're facing, there's hope in gathering together and looking toward the light. It was a beautiful night last night. Finally, this hour, a happy ending to a frightening rescue during Hurricane Milton back in October. A dog that was found tied to a fence in rising floodwaters is now in his new forever home. NBC's Valerie Castro has the story.
As Hurricane Milton barreled towards Florida in October, this video of an abandoned dog left tied to a fence along I-75 went viral.
It's okay, buddy. It's okay.
A Florida Highway Patrol trooper rescuing the bull terrier from chest-high floodwaters.
It's okay.
The dog ended up in the care of the Leon County Humane Society, naming him Trooper.
I was like, he's with us, he's safe, he's okay, and we get to decide like what happens with him, and we get to make sure that he's going to have a happy life and a happy ending.
The shelter says in the first week, more than 500 inquiries were made from people hoping to give Trooper that happy ending and a new home. But one in particular stood out above the rest.
So they sent an email to us within the first week of us having him, before we were even accepting applications on him or thinking about getting him adopted out.
The email came from Frank and Carla Spina, dog lovers familiar with the breed, who had also recently said goodbye to their own beloved bull terrier, Diesel.
Diesel left a hole in our hearts, the size of a baseball, and we were really sick over it. And I think when we saw Trooper together, we realized that Diesel was signaling us, hey, guys, you need to go move on. You need to go get Trooper and move on and take care of him now.
The day came for the couple to meet Trooper, and it couldn't have gone any better.
You're a good boy. Literally the moment they walked in, you could see that Trooper was totally cool with them.
One potential hiccup, Trooper's fear of men after abuse by a previous owner. But Frank didn't faze him.
And I had told them, I already know what's going to happen. I've been doing this 33 years. We're going to be best buddies in 5 minutes. And it took about 3 minutes.
Another wag of the tail came when it was time to meet their other dog, Dallas.
They were a match made in heaven.
Trooper now settling in at home.
Come on in, buddy. There he is. There he is.
A perfect fit with his new family. When you look back at that video where he's terrified and growling and, water up to his chest, and to see how far he's come, how do you feel knowing that you have been able to give him a second chance?
So I'm going to say this without crying. It's amazing. It feels really good.
He needed somebody to love him, and he's great. You can see he's great.
Valerie Castro, NBC News.
I think Trooper is pretty happy. I love to see that follow-up story. Thank you, Valerie. That's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now, but stick with us. The news continues right now. Good Thursday morning. I'm Joe Frost. Savannah is on assignment. Right now on Morning News Now, an urgent manhunt right here in New York City. Police looking for the man who carried out that targeted killing of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. But we're learning this morning about what was written on the bullets used to murder the insurance executive. President-elect Donald Trump's embattled Pentagon pick, Pete Hegseth, vowing to fight on as he grapples with allegations of excessive drinking and sexual misconduct inside his efforts to salvage his nomination in Washington. Also this morning, in the midst of a bustling holiday travel season, executives from several major airlines sparring with senators on Capitol Hill. At issue, those unpopular junk fees. How the carriers defended the extra charges and some fiery exchanges with lawmakers. Plus, the thrilling glow of Rockefeller Center's iconic Christmas tree now lighting up Midtown Manhattan for this season. I'll introduce you to the wonderful family behind this year's centerpiece and their roller coaster journey ahead of last night's lighting just outside of our studio. It's a touching story. We're going to start this morning with the manhunt for a killer who gunned down the CEO of UnitedHealthcare. This brazen early morning shooting was captured on a security camera here in New York City. Authorities are calling the chilling attack premeditated and targeted. Now, NBC News has learned shell casings found at the scene had the words deny, defend, and depose written on them. That's according to a senior New York City law enforcement official who was briefed on the investigation. NBC News correspondent Stephanie Gosk has the latest.
3 shell casings found on this very busy Manhattan street where the murder took place, with an apparent cryptic message on them. The words deny, defend, and depose. This morning, more than 24 hours after the murder, the NYPD has not made an arrest. They have video, they have photos, witnesses, they even know how the shooter fled, and he is still on the run. This morning, a killer remains on the loose after brazenly murdering Brian Thompson, the CEO of UnitedHealthcare. It happened on the streets of Midtown Manhattan early Wednesday morning. NBC News learning he left a chilling message. The words deny, defend, and depose were discovered on the shell casings at the scene, according to a senior law enforcement official.
This does not appear to be a random act of violence. Every indication is that this was a premeditated, pre-planned, targeted attack.
NBC News obtained this video of the shooting from a law enforcement official briefed on the investigation. The NYPD says Thompson was walking to an investors conference at a hotel. The gunman, wearing a hoodie, ski mask, and gray backpack, had been waiting for his target for several minutes, stepping out and firing multiple rounds from behind, hitting Thompson at least twice in his back and calf, according to police. At one point, the gun appeared to jam.
It does seem that he's proficient in the use of firearms, as he was able to clear the malfunctions pretty quickly.
4 minutes later, officers arrived on the scene, but the shooter had already fled on an e-bike, riding towards Central Park. Police releasing these photos taken before the shooting, showing the man at a Starbucks, and releasing this photo of him on a bike. The New York Times published surveillance footage it says was taken near the scene roughly 10 minutes before the shooting. NBC News reached out to the NYPD for comment on the video and did not hear back. United Health Group, which owns UnitedHealthcare, writing in a statement, "We are deeply saddened and shocked at the passing of our dear friend and colleague." Thompson lived in Minnesota with his wife Paulette and 2 children. In a phone conversation with an NBC News Digital reporter, his wife said Thompson had been receiving recent threats, but had not changed his routine. She also spoke to NBC's Minneapolis affiliate.
Brian was a wonderful person with a big heart and who lived life to the fullest.
The NYPD continues to
appeal to the public for any help they may have, posting on social media there's a $10,000 reward for any information leading to his arrest. Back to you.
All right, Stephanie, thank you. The man who wants to be Secretary of Defense now going on offense. One of President-elect Trump's most controversial cabinet picks, Pete Hegseth, is digging in his heels. But he faces a steep climb. Republican sources tell NBC News that as many as 6 GOP senators are not comfortable supporting his nomination. Hegseth will be back on Capitol Hill today for more meetings with senators. He's working to save his DOD bid amid mounting allegations related to his personal life, allegations he denies. Our Chief White House correspondent Peter Alexander has the latest. Peter, good morning.
Joe, good morning. Pete Hegseth remains defiant, as you noted, addressing these controversies surrounding him head on yesterday and saying in his words, he will fight like hell, insisting there's no reason to back down. But it's still unclear if his public statements and private meetings with senators are swaying those who ultimately control his fate. After previously acknowledging that he turned to alcohol to self-medicate following a close call with an RPG during his time in Iraq, Hegseth is now pledging that he would not have a single drink as Secretary of Defense.
This morning, with his bid to become Defense Secretary in jeopardy, Pete Hegseth is vowing to fight on, returning to Capitol Hill today for another round of meetings with senators after launching a public campaign to salvage his faltering nomination and detailing his conversation with President-elect Trump.
Hey, Pete, I got your back. It's a fight. They're coming after you. Get after it.
Hegseth brushing off an allegation of sexual assault for which he was never charged and he says was consensual, and blaming Trump's political enemies for accusations of financial mismanagement and excessive drinking.
What you're seeing right now with me is the art of the smear.
Then pledging, if confirmed, he won't drink another sip.
This is the biggest deployment of my life, and there won't be a drop of alcohol on my lips while I'm doing it.
After revelations that Hegseth's mom, Penelope, sent him a scathing email in 2018 calling him an abuser of women before retracting her words and apologizing, Mrs. Hegseth went on Fox News to defend her son, calling him a changed man.
Pete is a new person. He's redeemed, forgiven, changed. I believe he's the man for the job.
Hegseth has also drawn scrutiny for his past comments that women should not serve in combat. Yesterday, the current Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin praising women in the military.
And everywhere that I've gone on the battlefield, I've seen women fighting for America. If I get a little fired up about this, it's just because this isn't 1950. It isn't 1948. It is 2024.
Two sources tell NBC News Trump is already considering alternatives to Hegseth, including Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, a Navy veteran, and Iowa Senator Joni Ernst, who served in the Army National Guard and met with Hegseth Wednesday.
It was a frank and thorough conversation.
Did he ask you for your vote specifically?
Thank you.
President-elect Trump keeps rolling out his picks for his new administration, with more than a dozen on Wednesday alone, Joe, including billionaire entrepreneur Jared Isaacman. He would head up NASA. Isaacman has flown to space twice on commercial missions by SpaceX, which, as we know, has a CEO, Elon Musk, who is a top Trump ally. Joe.
All right, Peter, thank you so much. Now to one of the incoming administration's day one priorities, a pledge to carry out the largest deportation operation in American history. In an NBC News exclusive, at least 3 sources familiar with the plans told NBC that Trump officials are preparing a list of countries to deport migrants to if their home countries refuse to accept them. NBC News Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley joins us now with more on her reporting. Julia, good morning. So explain, why is this something the Trump administration would be considering even in the first place, and then which countries are on this list?
Well, Joe, as we understand it, there's a goal the incoming administration has for how quickly they want to deport people after they arrest them. They think that between the arrest and the flight, they have about 1 week if they want to deport the numbers they've been talking about in the millions. They don't have enough space to hold them. So what do they do when they arrest someone who's from a country that might be reluctant to take them back? In order to deport someone, you have to get paperwork. The other country has to have a tarmac ready, a way to take these people back. There are a lot of countries that are slow to accept them, a lot of countries that totally refuse to accept their migrants back. places like Venezuela and sometimes China, although we've had a few flights there. There have been a number of countries where it's very hard to deport people. So what's the workaround? Well, so far they're coming up with a list of small countries in this hemisphere they think might be able to take migrants back who aren't even from those countries. That includes the Turks and Caicos Islands, the Bahamas, Panama, and Grenada. And if those seem like odd places to you, they're small, many of them tourist destinations, and it's believed by this incoming administration they can pressure those countries into taking back migrants who actually have no connection there and might not even speak the language.
So, Julia, I'm curious how this would even work. I mean, these countries, do they have to agree to accept non-nationals that are being deported from the U.S.?
Yes, as I understand it from people I'm speaking to with knowledge of this plan, they're already in the process of talking to the countries, trying to get them to agree. They can use a number of pressure points. They could threaten tariffs. They could threaten diplomatically. A lot of these countries are entirely dependent on the U.S. economy and tourism. It's not something they can play around with. And so Trump could be using that pressure, much as he's trying to do with Mexico right now by threatening those 25% tariffs. We understand that's part of the same battle, but that Mexico is much more of an uphill fight to get them to agree to take back more non-Mexicans because they're already taking many back, even under the Biden administration, people who simply are blocked from crossing the border. But to take back people who may have been in this country for decades, that's a much harder thing to do. And it's believed right now these are the countries most willing to do it.
So we do have some history. We know the Trump administration tried this sort of thing before. It was on a much smaller scale with what we're describing here. Give us a history lesson and then just how did that play out?
Yeah, Joe, I had to go back and reread articles I had written in 2019 because this was actually kind of a blip in the terms of what everything the first Trump administration threw at the wall. This was when they started deporting people from the United States who had recently crossed back to Guatemala. The first person to do it was a man from Honduras. That was a relatively small operation because they started at the end of 2019. They were sued in court, and then COVID came in, and really they scrapped the whole thing. In fact, that lawsuit that was started by the ACLU is still pending, hanging around in federal courts. It's something that could be brought back, and it might be a reason why Guatemala is not on the list right now because they want to start to go down a different path. That's pure speculation on my part, but it could be one reason. And really, they could be looking at another lawsuit. I spoke to the ACLU last night. They still believe this is something that is against the law.
All right. Julia, thank you so much. Appreciate your reporting. Turning now to a terrifying incident at an elementary school in Northern California on Wednesday. 2 kindergarten students are fighting for their lives this morning after authorities say they were shot by a gunman who later took his own life. NBC News correspondent Liz Kreutz has the latest.
This morning, new questions about why a man with a gun opened fire at this elementary school in rural Northern California.
Shots fired, 27 Cox Lane between Highway 70 and Simpson Road.
Police say the first 911 calls came in Wednesday afternoon. 2 kindergarten students, 5 and 6-year-old boys, were shot and transported to hospitals, one airlifted.
I can tell you that the injuries are very, very serious, and these children are in extremely critical condition.
Police say they found the suspected shooter with a handgun, dead from an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound. The terrifying incident happening at Feather River Adventist, a K-8 private religious school with about 36 students. Police say the gunman was dropped off by an Uber and met with the school's principal to discuss enrolling a student.
We're trying to determine whether or not he actually was there to enroll or talk about enrolling a student, or if that was instead a ruse to get onto the campus.
Soon after, police say school administrators heard screams. This 6th grader says she heard the gunshots.
We were running to the gym. I looked back and I saw a shadow with a gun, so I told most people to run even faster.
The school put on lockdown. Students rushed to a nearby church.
My wife actually got the phone call, and it was heartache. Are you going to see your child?
And now authorities are investigating reports the suspect may have targeted the school because of its affiliation with the Seventh-day Adventist Church. The FBI assisting with the investigation.
When you're talking about little kids like this who can't defend themselves, it really does tear at the heart.
Thanks to Liz Kreutz for that report. Now, authorities say they know who the suspect is, but are not yet publicly identifying him. They don't know if he had any previous contact with the school, calling the incident isolated, but they've warned other schools affiliated with the Seventh-day Adventist Church to be vigilant. All right, this morning, large parts of the country are dealing with freezing weather and blizzard-like conditions. One of the places where temperatures have plunged is in western North Carolina, which is still recovering from Hurricane Helene. For more, let's bring in NBC News correspondent Kathy Park, who joins us from Asheville. Kathy, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning to you. Yeah, millions are waking up to an Arctic blast. And here at Asheville, it's expected to drop into the teens later on tonight. But hard to believe, this area was actually underwater 2 months ago from Helene. And now residents are dealing with another round of extreme weather, this time dangerously cold conditions. This morning, Americans bracing for chilling winter weather. The coldest Arctic air of the season blanketing the Midwest and heading towards the East Coast after a cold snap yesterday hit southern states not used to the extreme chill. New Bern, North Carolina dropping to 22 degrees and Florence, South Carolina at just 20. And while it will warm up today, tomorrow frigid temps are returning to the area. And it all comes while some residents are still reeling from Hurricane Helene, which swept through more than 2 months ago, especially in hard-hit Asheville.
I see families, kids and families sleeping in living rooms with holes in the roof. And every day that we offer the heaters, the line is probably longer than a mile.
Cassie Hale and her family have been living in a camper since the storm, using this parking lot as a temporary campground. What is your day-to-day looking like now?
We get up, we warm up the camper, and then we go to work. The kids go to the library, I homeschool.
Farther north, parts of the country buried under feet of snow and bracing for even more with a powerful clipper system on the move. Hard-hit Erie, Pennsylvania could see another round of lake effect snow. National Guard members have been called in to help residents dig out. And back here at Asheville, the damage from Helene was so severe, Joe. You can see behind me, these homes are still being repaired. We also learned that some residents actually got their power back on this week. But in a bit of good news, volunteers are coming in from across the country to get these residents back on their feet.
Yeah, a reminder just how slow the recovery is there. Kathy, thank you so much. For more on the latest winter alerts, let's go to NBC meteorologist Angie Lassman. Angie, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. There are a whole lot of alerts this morning. 17 million people across parts of the Northeast and the Great Lakes are under those alerts, with a couple of spots dealing with blizzard warnings. Erie, one of those locations. We just heard Kathy mention how impactful that weather has been across that region here over the past week or so, with ample amounts of snow falling downwind of those lakes. And we've got more where that came from. You can see winter storm warnings for a lot of folks. And this is just ramping up. So we've got a system that's working through. Right now, most of the rain is confined to the coastal areas, of course, where it's a little warmer closer to the coast. But back in those higher elevations and farther west across this region, snow is falling. We'll see those snow squalls associated with this fast-moving system here as we get through the day today. We're also going to note that strong winds will be out there. That gives us a little bit of some problematic situations when it comes to travel. And, of course, downwind of the lake, that means more of that strong wind working across those warm lake waters and more moisture falling in the form of snow on the backside of those lakes. So that's exactly what's going to happen, not just today, but notice tomorrow, too. You see some of those bands still developing on the east side of those lakes, again, in areas that already picked up an ample amount of snow just last week. Here's the look at what we're expecting in addition to that. So through Saturday, basically into the first half of our weekend, some amounts with a good total here expected. We've got over a foot in some locations across Pennsylvania and New York, but we could see some isolated spots about 2 feet. So heads up for that. This, of course, is going to make travel difficult. Most of this is confined to the interior areas of New England and the Northeast. But again, downwind of the lake is where we're expecting the most substantial snowfall by the time we get through the weekend. Big picture look of your wind alerts. Those are going to be quite impactful, too, especially, again, when it comes to travel. We've got 51 million people under these alerts, stretching from Asheville to State College up to Hartford, including New York down to Washington, D.C. What does this mean? It means that our winds are going to be elevated throughout the day, but we could see peak wind gusts 40, 50 miles per hour, especially closer to the coast. New York, Boston, Baltimore, all into the 40s kind of range here as we get through your afternoon hours. That likely will mean that we could deal with some downed trees, down power lines. All of that kind of difficulty will be there. But on top of that, the travel is going to be hard for some locations across this area, specifically airports in New York and Philadelphia. But I wouldn't rule out some impacts to Boston and Washington, D.C. And, of course, they're possible in Detroit and Chicago as well as this system continues moving through. So we'll watch for that here as we get through the day today. The cold is a different story. We've got that stretched across a good chunk of the country. So especially the plains, look how impressive these temperatures are. We've got 1 degree in Huron. It feels like -10 right now. We're, well into the morning hours. 19 degrees in Flint, but feeling like 4. Chicago right now 12 degrees and feeling sub-zero. We've got 19 in Cincinnati and just single-digit wind chills across much of this region. Now, as we get into the warmest part of the day today, not much improvement, but I suppose we'll take it. 28 is better than 12 for Chicago, so we'll top out into the high 20s there. Evansville, similar story for you guys. We'll see 30s for Roanoke, 50s for Atlanta, and a lot of these temperatures are well below where they should be for this time of year. So Memphis, you should be a whole lot warmer in early December, but instead you're going to top out at 39 degrees today. So moral of the story, extra layers for sure, not just today, but tomorrow too. A lot of that chilly air works its way farther to the east. So New York City, it's not a balmy temperature today, but tomorrow 35 degrees. We'll see temperatures continue to drop here as we get through the weekend. And then we are stuck with that for only a short time, Joe. Back to the 50s we go, closer to the coast by the time Monday rolls around.
All right, we'll take it. Bring it in.
I'm glad you approve.
Thanks, Angie. Appreciate it. All right, still to come, much more in this hour of Morning News Now, including the airline junk fee showdown on Capitol Hill that's pitting lawmakers against top executives with passengers stuck in the middle seat. But first, after the break, the brewing AI debate over a virtual avatar of Jesus in one of the oldest churches in Switzerland. We're going to have more on that next. Welcome back. One of Switzerland's oldest churches has swapped out its priest for an AI-powered avatar of Jesus in its confession booth. The experiment, which allows people to ask questions and discuss their troubles, is, as you can imagine, sparking debate among the religious community. NBC News correspondent Kelly Kobiea joins us now with more on this. Kelly, good morning.
Joe, good morning to you. Yeah, this was a 2-month experiment with researchers and theologians wanting to test people to see whether they would take the leap and confess to an avatar.
At the 300-year-old St. Peter's Chapel in Lucerne, Switzerland, inside this confessional booth is an AI-generated version of Jesus Christ.
Hello, Jesus.
A lifelike avatar on a computer screen, answering questions in real time, offering advice to the faithful based on scripture in over 100 languages.
Let kindness and compassion steer your course.
It's called Deus in Machina, or God in the Machine, and was developed by a Swiss IT expert using OpenAI's GPT-4o. The idea, the chapel's theologian said, is to explore the limits of human trust in technology.
Many people came to talk with him. There were young people, older people. People really talked with him in a serious way.
The experience comes with instructions and a disclaimer not to share personal information, but the church said most had a positive experience.
Topics like relationship, love, topics like about God. They ask him what to do.
Esto se está saliendo de control.
The virtual experiment generating debate and controversy worldwide.
This is not sacramental. This truly is just sacrilegious. This is ridiculous.
This is just the start of a big conversation around the role of AI in religion.
The church's theologian says this AI Jesus was never meant to replace a priest, but instead to get people thinking about the digital and the divine.
And the church really says that this was a success for them. They say that they had questionnaires, which about 300 people who interacted with the avatar filled out afterward. And roughly 200 of those people said that they had a very positive experience. Some found it deeply moving and walked away really thinking about those responses. They also said that they've had a lot of interest from other parishes, school teachers, and others, not only in Switzerland, but beyond. This was a pilot project, Joe, but they're now looking at other ways they can incorporate AI in the daily operations of their church. Joe?
It's interesting. On the surface, I understand the immediate backlash, the concern, but it is important to listen to the people who are actually doing it to see what their experience is like. So, all right. Kelly Kobiea, thank you so much. More international news now. Turmoil in France after a historic no-confidence vote against the country's prime minister there. NBC News international correspondent Claudio Lavanga joined us from Rome with that and some other world news. Claudio, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. Well, the fact that Barnier, the French Prime Minister, was ousted literally 3 months after he was appointed essentially makes his government the shortest lived in French history. But his demise, despite this short amount of time, didn't come as a surprise, because since Macron appointed him in September, he had to deal with a divided parliament without real majority and widespread public discontent. His resignation will inevitably lead to a period of political uncertainty, not only for the government, but also for President Macron, because if he doesn't find a replacement that has the support of the majority soon, he's also going to come under pressure to resign. Let's go to South Korea now, where the defense minister there resigned over his role in the short-lived declaration of martial law. The defense minister accepted responsibility for ordering troops to enact martial law declared by the president on Tuesday evening, only to be retracted hours later. He also apologized for causing concerns and confusion to the people. South Korea's president is also facing calls to step down, as a motion to impeach him also is expected to be voted in the coming days. And let's end this tour of the world in Cuba, where on Wednesday the energy grid collapsed once again, leaving the capital Havana in the dark and millions of people across the country without power. This is only the latest in a series of failures within the energy infrastructure, which dates back to the Soviet times. The government announced the suspension of work and teaching activities, while the state-run energy company tries to switch the power back on. Back to you, John.
All right, Claudio, thank you so much. We are just days away from the historic Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris officially opening its doors to the public once again. This comes just 5 years after it was almost destroyed by a devastating fire. President-elect Donald Trump, First Lady Dr. Jill Biden are going to be there for this weekend's ceremony. But before that, we've got a special look at the amazing rebuilding efforts to return this iconic building to its original glory. We're keeping Kelly Kobiea busy this morning. She's now giving us a closer look inside the restoration process.
Before the fire, Notre Dame was undergoing its first restoration since the 1800s. Scaffolding surrounded the roof and spire. Now it's lying in a heap on the cathedral floor, a giant tangle of burned metal mixed with charred wood and toxic lead dust. The conditions inside the cathedral are hazardous and physically demanding. Only a small number of workers are allowed in at a time, like Stephanie Duchesne, covered head to toe in protective gear. As chief archaeologist for the Ministry of Culture, she and her team are charged with recovering what they can while staying safe. There's a danger the walls could collapse.
The walls were monitored by laser to see if they were moving, and the first day I came in, it was moving too much. They were moving too much, and we were asked to get out the cathedral. We ran very fast.
You ran?
Yeah.
You can hear more from the people who work to restore Notre Dame and get a closer look at their 5-year effort in Out of the Ashes, the comeback of Notre Dame. That airs tonight on NBC News Now at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Coming up, the battle brewing on Capitol Hill over those pesky airline junk fees. After the break, how top executives responded to a grilling by lawmakers accused of gouging travelers for billions in revenue. Tom Costello has more on that next. Welcome back. Fresh off last week's record holiday travel period, airline executives are in the hot seat, facing questions about so-called junk fees that are increasing costs for travelers. Appearing before a congressional committee on Wednesday, those executives were grilled on the fees and accused of gouging travelers for billions in revenue. NBC News senior correspondent Tom Costello covers aviation for us and joins us with more. Tom, good morning.
Joe, you may say that these airline execs were actually in the middle seat, right? I mean, really an uncomfortable position in front of lawmakers from both sides of the political aisle. We've all become used to paying for certain things, right? You pay for your bags often. You pay for maybe a bag that you put overhead. You pay for a meal. And now we're paying for a seat. The airlines say, oh, no, you have the choice to pay or not to pay. You could sit in the back, in the middle if you want to. But now, a bipartisan grilling, as you said, on Capitol Hill, these lawmakers want to make flying even more transparent.
For many flyers, soaring fees on the nation's largest airlines are increasingly leading to sky-high frustration.
This is so ridiculous. I shouldn't have to be paying for
a seat.
While most airlines have been charging fees for bags for years, lawmakers say between 2018 and 23, American, Delta, United, Spirit, and Frontier brought in nearly $12.5 billion for fees related to seats. And for the first time since 2018, on United last year, passengers paid more for seats than luggage.
Passengers now are forced to pay extra for almost everything.
Nobody enjoys flying on your airlines. It's a disaster. You charge people fees that they know nothing about.
In a Capitol Hill hearing, lawmakers say customers are facing what they call skyrocketing junk fees.
You just said as a flight's filling up, you're going to get charged more.
Not always. Sometimes you'll get charged less.
But you'll never know, right? That's the beauty of it. It's like Russian roulette.
Airline executives say some of those charges are meant to provide travelers with choices.
Nearly 50% of people are not paying for a bag or a seat. We are providing options that people are deciding whether they want that or not.
We clearly disclose any fees in advance of booking.
But lawmakers on both sides of the aisle say how and when airlines deploy the fees is not consistent.
It would be good if you guys could be transparent about what you do and why.
It all comes during a record year for air travel. The TSA has marked all of its top 10 days for screening passengers in 2024. Experts say on average for a one-way flight, most airlines charge about $30 to $35 for a checked bag. The airlines were pressed at Wednesday's hearing on how much of that generates profit for the airlines.
We look at our profitability very carefully by flight and by market and by region, but we do not look at our profitability by baggage.
It defies imagination. It defies common sense.
So, Tom, I know the DOT's out with a new effort to help passengers when they're stranded by disruptions. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Joe, this is just breaking this morning. The Department of Transportation out with a new proposed rule that would require the airlines to provide you with cash compensation. Let's underscore that. Cash compensation if your flight is delayed, specifically by at least 3 hours. The numbers would go up depending on how much time. More for an international flight, for example. It would also require airlines to offer free rebooking if flights are canceled or if there's a significant delay on departure. Would include money, by the way, to cover meal, lodging, transportation expenses, and the like. So this is a proposed rule by the DOT. The airlines, for their part, say, listen, if you force the airlines to pay up even more than they already do when a flight is delayed or canceled, that will simply drive up ticket prices. They say it's not a good idea. But here's the big caveat, Joe. We are going into a new administration, a Trump administration, and that Department of Transportation might not move forward with this. We'll have to see what their take is on it. Back to you.
Important to keep in mind. We know you'll stay on it, Tom. Thank you. With holiday shopping in full swing, it can feel for some like you're living at the mall this time of year. But now with department stores rapidly shutting their doors and mall owners looking to fill empty spaces, well, that's exactly what some people are choosing to do. Live at the mall. CNBC retail reporter Gabrielle Fonrouge joins us now with more on this. Gabrielle, good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, the classic American mall is in the midst of a dramatic transformation. Department stores like Macy's and JCPenney keep shutting down, so real estate developers are building apartments in their place. I spoke with some tenants of these buildings to learn what life at the mall is really like.
So welcome to the teeny tiny shoebox apartment inside the arcade. There are lots of others in the building just like this. So mine is about 250 square feet. There's a walkway right in front of the facade because this used to be a shop front, and so people had to access all of the shops in the building.
While malls across the U.S. are facing store closures and empty parking lots, some are finding a new life from an unlikely source. We are here at the Arcade Mall in Providence, Rhode Island, the oldest indoor shopping mall in the country. The arcade had long been a center point in Providence's bustling downtown, but like other malls, it fell on hard times and was completely vacant. But rather than letting this historic building fall into ruin, developers came in and decided to build 48 micro-lofts here on the second floor and up here on the third floor. While top-tier malls continue to be in high demand, nearly 34 million square feet of U.S. mall space is vacant and off the market. Almost 70% of Americans live within an hour of a mall that has a high vacancy rate, low consumer traffic, or is abandoned altogether. At the same time, the country is facing a massive housing deficit of 4.5 million homes.
There's a housing problem in a lot of markets across the U.S., right? This is an opportunity to find land and have a built-in customer base to get people into the mall.
Monday through Friday, this is really busy down here. It's definitely, people in the offices working, getting lunch or whatever, and my barber's downstairs.
As of January 2022, at least 192 U.S. malls plan to add a housing component. The U.S. has about 1,100 regional and super-regional malls, about 8.5% lower than 2015. Amy Hinyon has been living on the top floor of a 3-story mall in Providence, Rhode Island for the past 2.5 years. What's it like to live at the mall?
It's really great. It's cool to be part of such a historic building and knowing that every single one of these units used to be a shop of some kind.
But living in a converted store does present some challenges.
Here is my very tiny kitchen. It is very small, but it is workable. And one of the interesting things about the units in the building is that because of codes, you can't have any cooking devices with an open flame. So none of the units have stoves or ranges.
Do you ever have any concerns about privacy?
Not really. It's something you get used to living in the building, having people coming and going. Everybody has blinds in their apartment that they can raise or lower as they like.
Despite those challenges, residents say having access to shops and restaurants makes living at the arcade a unique experience.
I get my hair cut in the salon downstairs, and there's little lunch spots, so you don't even have to leave the building.
So some of these new housing developments are built directly inside of the mall, like we just saw with the arcade. But that's hard to do while also making sure that everyone gets light and air. That's why a lot of developers are building apartments that are adjacent to the mall and connecting them with green spaces or walkways. This is really big for suburban areas outside of cities because it creates what feels like a miniature village. Housing, restaurants, and shopping all a few steps away. Joe?
Interesting idea. All right. Thank you so much. Coming up, it is the latest trend in workplace culture known as the Great Detachment. After the break, why some employees say they're feeling stuck and disconnected at their jobs, what companies can do in the new year to try and right the ship. That's next on Morning News Now. We're back with the latest phenomenon among employees in offices around the U.S. Experts call it the Great Detachment. New research from Gallup found employees are feeling less motivated by their work these days because of unclear job expectations and feeling disconnected from their employer's mission and purpose. These feelings are driving more than half of workers to actively seek out a new job. Here with more on this is Jessica Kriegel. She is the Chief Scientist of Workplace Culture at Culture Partners. Jessica, good to have you with us. So first, let's sort of explain what detachment means in this context and just tell us what is it that's causing employees to have these feelings right now?
Well, detachment in this context is feeling stuck. It's feeling unconnected from my leadership team, unconnected from the company. There's no bond there. And ultimately, I'm not feeling fulfilled in the work that I'm doing right now. And I think that maybe the grass would be greener elsewhere. And we felt something similar a couple years ago. Remember, the Great Resignation was only 2 years ago, and that was in a hot job market. And so people feeling detached were able to leap, and they were able to command higher salaries. Well, now we don't have that luxury, and so people are feeling like there's nothing that they can do to get out of this feeling of being stuck, and so they're resentful, and they're having, they're having concerns about what this means for their future, and companies are struggling to figure it out.
I'm curious if this is like a generational thing or a problem we have with leadership nowadays. I mean, what can leaders and managers do to try and help employees feel engaged, feel connected again?
Well, there's two sides to this. There is the question of what leaders can do. And I think that book has been written 10 times over. We've been talking about create a compelling purpose statement. And then these purpose statements get written and they're full of business jargon about accelerating digital transformation. And no one feels attached to that, not even the leaders that are writing them. So I think a more interesting question is what's going on from the employee standpoint? And is this perhaps a mindset issue, an issue of not finding fulfillment in the place where you are, and perhaps expectations are too high for what can my manager do for me. And I looked at the data because I wanted to understand, is this really reflecting all elements of the workforce or just frontline workers or just white collar workers? But it is pulled from a cross section of the American workforce, which means your manager probably feels detached too. And I know CEOs that feel detached from their work. And so maybe this is something we all share, and the focus should not be, what have you done for me lately? But rather the focus should be, what can I do to get myself out of this funk and embrace where I am?
Yeah, rely on yourself, not other people. I mean, help us understand. How important is it for employees to have a strong bond with their company, to feel connected at work? Can you be successful if you just look at your job as, I got to go there, do the job. I may not love it, but it pays the bills?
Yeah, at Culture Partners, we talk about there's two kinds of mindsets, above the line thinking and below the line thinking. Below the line thinking is the blame game. It's pointing fingers. It's saying, I'm not getting paid enough. I don't care about this mission statement. No one's told me what to do, right? And above the line thinking is, what can I do to drive results? What can I focus on that's within my control? And so I would encourage people to do that. Ask yourself 4 questions. What's going on? What about that can I control? What else could I try? And what am I going to do by when? And if I focus on that, I'm not waiting for someone who's also probably feeling detached to solve my problem for me.
I like those 4 questions right there. Jessica, some great advice. Thanks for joining us this morning. Let's get a look at what's making financial headlines. You may have to start skipping the extra guac at Chipotle after this latest price hike. CNBC's Savannah now has that and some other money news. Savannah, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning. I don't know if I could skip the guac. All right, let's start with that. Chipotle, which the burritos and bowls are getting more expensive, and the chain is raising menu prices by 2% to offset higher costs for avocados, queso, and sour cream, while also trying to maintain its appeal to consumers looking for deals and discounts. Now, analysts say the timing, well, it could bode well for demand because Chipotle's management had considered delaying any price moves if consumer sentiment or the economic backdrop worsened following last month's election. Robinhood CEO says the trading platform is considering a move into sports betting. Speaking at an investor conference, Vlad Tenev says that could take the form of event contracts, similar to what Robinhood launched right before the election. Those markets, which lets users buy and sell from each other, are different than traditional sports books where all bets are made against the house. And Spotify users are calling foul on the streaming platform. Now, they're slamming what they see as a disappointing wrapped package, which they believe was hurt by delays, underwhelming features, and a lack of stats compared to other services like Apple Music. Spotify Wrapped didn't tell users their top genres of 2024 or their top album, which it has in past years. New features include an AI podcast breaking down users' listening habits and a music evolution, which assigns phrases to describe what you've listened to during specific months, such as Pink, Pilates, Princess, Strut Pop. That some people say, well, it makes no sense at all, Joe.
Yeah, that's a lot of things that I don't think go together, but I don't know. I just looked at my Apple Music. Orville Peck was my top for this year.
Oh, I haven't checked mine. I have to look. I'm going to look.
All right, let us know. Get back to us tomorrow.
Okay.
Thanks. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas here in New York City. That's right, the world-famous Rockefeller Center Christmas tree shining bright this morning following last night's star-studded tree lighting ceremony right outside our studios. For the first time since 1959, this year's tree is from Massachusetts. We spoke with the family behind this 74-foot Norway spruce about the decades-long journey that started with planting that tree nearly 6 decades ago.
3, 2, 1!
Before the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree was lit, before it made that 140-mile trek from the Berkshires, before it was cut down during a jubilant community celebration, this Norway spruce was a humble roadside attraction in West Stockbridge, Massachusetts, residing for 57 years on the Albert family's property.
How does it feel to have your tree picked as the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree?
Well, I consider it probably one of the greatest honors of my life.
Earl and his wife Leslie planted the tree in 1967, a year after they got married. It was picked as Rock Center's Christmas icon in 2020, just days after Leslie passed away.
This is definitely her
deal.
her handiwork.
Yeah. What do you think she's thinking?
I'm thinking she's thrilled. Every Christmas was family. Everything we did was family.
We first chatted with the Albert family in October. A couple weeks later, the tree got the chop. A joyful day that ended with heartbreaking news. Earl suffered a stroke.
He's got some medical hurdles to get over.
But he is recovering, strengthened by thousands of holiday get-well letters. And though he couldn't see the lighting in person, Earl did watch on TV. What he told me in October, still holding true.
What do you think you'll be thinking of in that moment?
Leslie, how much she enjoyed trees, and how much she enjoyed Christmas.
And just how much it means to find the light in the dark.
So I had the pleasure of catching up with the Albert family yesterday. This morning, they joined our friends at the Today Show to discuss the tree lighting. Here's a clip.
What was it like for you guys witnessing that?
For me, it was just like, it's so like an overwhelming emotion of like joy, and like it was a tribute to my mother's life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like just like the giving back, just the loving nature of her. It was just, it's our way to like kind of give to the world, and just, it's awesome.
What would she think of all this? Here you are on the Today Show. The tree is back there. That's the tree you grew up playing under.
She would be absolutely ecstatic.
Yeah,
she'd be trying to figure out how to record it on the VCR. We don't have that anymore. Yeah.
It's so fun to watch people take pictures with that tree in the background. So the tree that was just for you guys is now going to be probably in frames all over the country for years and years to come. It's such an impact. I know it must have been difficult to think about giving that tree because it did mean a lot to your family.
Yeah, it did. The fact that it was going to end up here was just incredible. And you don't realize, the whole build-up. There's such a build-up to the whole process. And so, from Eric coming and asking to the day of the cutting, and then walking around the corner and seeing it, you don't realize how emotional it's going to be, how off guard it takes you.
If you want to catch a glimpse of this year's iconic Rock Center Christmas tree, it's going to be on display from 5 a.m. to midnight each night. That's when it's lit, and it'll be up through mid-January. Coming up, and the winner is... after the break, we're going to dig into one of entertainment's most exciting times of the year. It's awards season coming up, so which of your favorite shows and films might be in the running for a big nod this time around? We got the scoop next. We're back now looking ahead to one of the most exciting times of the year, film awards season. Next week, the Hollywood Foreign Press Association is set to announce the Golden Globe nominations. Next month, January 17th, we'll find out who's in the running for an Oscar. That's not all. We also have the Screen Actors Guild Awards, the Critics' Choice Awards, the BAFTAs, the Razzies, just to name a few. Joining us now with his picks for who's in the running for the big nods, television host, pop culture expert Andrew Freund. As I like to say, our friend Freund is here. Andrew, good to have you with us. So let's start with the big one, Best Picture. You have Wicked at the top of the list. Perhaps not a surprise. Talk about that and what other films you think could be in the running.
Yeah, Joe, of course, Wicked is a global phenomenon. It's made over $365 million worldwide. It's funny, I was working in Sydney, Australia earlier this week, and it's all anyone can talk about in Australia. So Wicked is definitely in the zeitgeist right now and on track to receive a lot of nominations. Now, I also have Emilia Perez. Emilia Perez comes from Netflix, and I don't really want to give away too much details about this film because it's really... if you go in not knowing too much about it, it makes it that much better. But what I can say, it revolves around a cartel boss who hires an attorney looking to transition and have gender affirmation surgery. And that's all I'm going to say about Emilia Perez. I highly, highly recommend it. It's fascinating. And then I want to talk about September 5. Now, September 5 is about the 1972 Munich Olympic hostage situation, and it follows the ABC News group that was there and reporting on it. And back then, sports wasn't really responsible for reporting on hard news, but they were the crew that was there. Really, really fascinating film. Highly recommend.
All right, let's get into the acting category, starting with Best Actress. I guess if we're talking Wicked, we have to talk about Cynthia Erivo. You've also mentioned Nicole Kidman. Talk more about who you've got on the list here and who could be the early favorites.
Yeah, I mean, just talking about Cynthia Erivo gives me like the goosebumps just hearing her voice in that movie, Joe. So, of course, Cynthia Erivo in Wicked. Nicole Kidman in Baby Girl. Now, this movie, Nicole Kidman, is like 2 hours of her having orgasms, basically. It's a lot of moaning, Joe, a lot of moaning in Baby Girl. But Nicole Kidman is absolutely phenomenal in this film. And then, you know, I have a dark horse in here is Demi Moore. I'm not sure if you've seen The Substance. Demi Moore, fantastic in that film.
Yeah, she's getting a lot of buzz about that. She also ate all those hot wings recently on Hot Ones. Didn't faze her a bit. So if that should be a sign right there. Real quick, if Carla Sofia Gascon is nominated, she'd make history, right?
Correct. If Carla Sofia Gascon gets nominated, which I'm pretty much sure she will be the first trans woman nominated to Best Actress. Now, this is a groundbreaking role for her, and this would be a groundbreaking thing to happen. She also won Best Actress in Cannes. I can't tell you, she is bold, she's audacious, she is just, oh God, she's so good, Joe. You gotta see her in Amelia Perez, she's fantastic.
I think you're excited, Andrew. I gotta check that one out. We got like 30 seconds here, but we gotta talk about the guys, Best Actor. Who's topping your list there?
Best Actor right now, I have Ralph Fiennes for Conclave. Of course, this film is phenomenal. It surrounds about how they select the Pope. I also have Adrian Brody in The Brutalist and Coleman Domingo in Sing Sing, Joe. It's a great time for film.
It's a very good time. Coleman Domingo, of course, just a nominee last year, so could be nominated again this year. Excited. This is the time of year where we get to finally catch all those movies. We see who's on everyone's lists. Go check them out. Andrew Freund, as always, thank you so much. Appreciate it. I'm sure we'll talk more this awards season. That's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now, but stick with us. The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.